Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we're looking at another Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank. Don't know how this one is going to go into the game, but it is currently being super tested and we've got more information about it now, so I think it's actually worth talking about it. It is the Object 780. This vehicle looks like it's pretty much going to perform similar to an Object 277 or WZ-111-5A, and really those kind of tanks are the complete meta of the game at the moment. And so I'm sure that you're all going to be looking forward to seeing this one, or not looking forward to it possibly coming into the battlefield in the future. So before I get stuck into the statistics and show you how this vehicle stacks up compared to its competition, let's just take a quick look at how the vehicle's aesthetics are, and importantly, the armor loadout. That lower plate looks incredibly well angled, almost kind of like a concave lower plate, which should function in a very interesting fashion. I mean, from the looks of it from here, it looks as if maybe shots towards the lower of the lower plate are going to be at a much flatter angle, probably increasing your chances to pen. But if you hit the beak at the front, looks like it's always going to bounce. That upper hull is incredibly well angled. As we can see from the side, maybe there's another screenshot which shows us from an even better angle. Wow, look at those cheeks. If you put this thing front on, that's going to be tricky. And oh my word, perspective means everything, right, boys and girls? Just look at that lower plate. That is looking at this tank kind of from underneath it. Sure, I guess you're going to be able to shoot down on the upper hull if you're face hugging it and you've got fairly good gun depression. But that just, where is the lower plate, Wargaming? Oh, please, please, please say this isn't going to be another Object 279E all over again. We'll have to wait to see about the thickness of this armor as to whether it's going to be the case there. But this side angling should be very good, although that kind of triangle on the side does look like it could be a little bit weak side scraping. But then again, if you're side scraping and exposing that much of your armor, well, I guess you're going to have to, aren't you? Maybe that'll be a bit of a shot catch on the side. Hard to say, but from here it looks very flat, but it looks like it kind of curves out a little bit there. Maybe that will catch some heat rounds on the side, possibly, maybe even some AP rounds. Wow, this is a very low-profile heavy tank. It kind of looks almost more like a light tank or a medium, although I expect it to be quite large, like a pancake, right? Maybe very long indeed. All in all, that turret from the side looks like it could still ricochet some rounds depending on how thick it is. The back is definitely going to be a bit of a weak point. But that front, we all know what that kind of a shape of turret is with regards to its efficiency when you're trying to penetrate it from the side. Yeah, good luck. Whether we're going to be able to overmatch the top of the turret from the front remains to be seen. We can't really see there. We can see just kind of like the plate that's welded on top. There's a chance this could be overmatchable, although Wargaming haven't really done that since the IS-4, right? And they're buffing the IS-4 to kind of remove that top weak point, so you'd expect them to do the same for the Object 780. Anyway, that is it for the aesthetics of the vehicle. This looks like a very imposing tank, and I'm already getting quite excited just thinking about possibly playing this one. Now, Wargaming have provided us with an infographic of all of the statistics of the vehicle. The things that I want you to take from this is that it has a 3-person crew. Wow. A commander, a gunner, and a driver. That's very unique for a Soviet layout, and I wonder if the radio operator is going to be the commander. I wonder who's going to do the loading job, because you're probably going to want to have safe stowage on the vehicle as well. Is this going to be part of a new line of heavy tanks, or is it going to just be a reward vehicle? We can only really theory craft about that right now. If it is going to be a reward vehicle having a 3 crew member loadout, will not exactly make it very exciting for crew training, that's for sure. And it'll also make it very awkward to use your crews from other tanks in this vehicle, because of course you've kind of got 2 loaders worth of crew skills that are going to be going on the other 3 crew members, and the radio operator on the commander, although really on Soviet tanks the radio operator doesn't really do too much anyway. So the other thing I want you to highlight before I go and take a comparison of these statistics is it fires AP, APCR, and high explosive rounds. And apart from that, I don't really like the way that Wargaming have loaded this out. We're not really able to get much of a comparison. So in true QuickyBaby fashion, we have it on an Excel spreadsheet. So I want to compare the Object 780 here to the Object 277 and also the WZ-111-5A. And you're going to see just how similar these vehicles are. So, immediately, what kind of a caliber of gun does the 780 has? It has exactly the same as the other 2 tanks in this comparison. It's got a 130mm main armament. That means that you will be able to overmatch all 40mm side armor plates, so you'll be able to butter your way through a Progetto, for example, or maybe overmatch some of the roof decks of your vehicles. It is quite nice to have a 130 compared to 120 in World of Tanks, and even something like a Badger having 1mm, a 121mm can make all the difference. Alright, so all 130mm usually have got 490 alpha damage unless they're on a tank destroyer, for example, and that's no exception here. 490 on its standard rounds, 490 on its gold rounds. Its high explosive rounds, 640, but really it's about the penetration. It's got decent alpha, but is its penetration kind of decent as well? So 268 on its standard rounds, 305 on its gold rounds. That's quite disappointing, but also quite nice because it's very good if people aren't just spamming gold in vehicles like these. Really, it doesn't change the fact that everybody else has already got very good gold rounds in the 277 and the WZ-111-5A, which means that you are not going to be able to just load the gold and spam through the turret of a mouse every single time, for example, unlike all of the other heavy tanks are able to. Whether Wargame... One thing that I've noticed is that quite a lot of the new tanks going in the game at tier 10 do have these lesser pen premium rounds. I'm not sure if that suggests that Wargaming are realizing that, yeah, the old premium rounds are just a bit too good and they make armor completely useless, or if it's suggesting that maybe they want to actually lower the penetration of all of the premium rounds at tier 10 in the game currently, and or obviously the tier 9 and tier 8 tanks that use tier 10 guns as well. I think it would obviously just buff armor. Anyway, I'm not going to fall into that loophole. That's a whole other video in itself, and I really want to focus on the Object 780. All you really need to know is that everything is subject to change with regards to the statistics of this tank, and currently it has abysmal premium rounds, which will struggle in those kind of really important trades against tier 10 tanks. The high explosive rounds, however, have 65mm of penetration, as with all of these tanks. Now, the Object 780 actually has the worst rate of fire in this comparison, 4.29. 2,100 damage per minute. That's kind of the damage per minute that all of the heavies used to have in the game. Now all of the heavies have kind of, your 2,352. Even the IS-7 has had a rate of fire buff. The WZ-111-5A and vehicles like that are packing 2,625 damage per minute. This does feel as if it's a little lackluster with regards to the DPM. I would argue actually more balanced, and I think that all of the other heavies should have this kind of a rate of fire too, and there shouldn't really be heavy tanks like the WZ-111-5A that are really starting to encroach on the damage per minute of the medium tanks in the game. So now on to gun handling, accuracy, 0.38, nothing really to write home about here. However, the aim time, I'm just going to have to triple check that I didn't make a mistake on this, because that looks very good indeed. No, aiming time, 2 seconds. Alright, do Wargaming want this thing to be an absolute snapshot, Lord? 2 seconds aim time? It could be a typo from Wargaming. If not, that is an incredibly good aim time for a Soviet heavy tank. Of course, we don't know about the dispersion values that the vehicle has when it turns the turret and when it moves the hull. Those are incredibly important. Because while the aim time is pretty much the time that it takes for your circle to get a third smaller, so it will actually take 3 times the aim time of the tank roughly to be able to fully aim a shot in. It's the dispersion values which affects as to how far your reticle actually blooms out. That's why a vehicle like the FV4005 turns into a pineapple on your screen, and it takes still a long time to be able to get that pineapple smaller because of the long aim time, but it gets bigger than any of the other pineapples in the game. So if this vehicle has good dispersion values and a really good aim time as well, that could make it very dynamic and very mobile and able to engage quickly after moving, which could be fantastic for the vehicle. So the gun depression of this tank is 6 degrees, just a little better than the 277 and the same as the IS-7, for example. It's a little bit worse than the WZ-111-5A, however. Elevation of 15 degrees, that's actually not very good. You're not going to have the stereotypical huge gun elevation that Soviet tanks have, so even if you get above them, they're still able to engage effectively against you. The turret traverse of 25, yeah, whatever, it's normal for a heavy tank, right? Okay, so now onto the mobility of the vehicle. 870 horsepower of the engine, yet the vehicle weighs 50 tons, giving this tank a 17.5 power to weight ratio, making it just a bit better than the 277, much better than the 5A. Of course, we don't know about the ground resistances that this tank has either. Hidden statistics that Wargaming don't show you in the garage that will kind of either that will balance that out. But with a base power to weight ratio of 17.5. It's kind of more like a medium, a slower medium, but definitely one of the faster heavy tanks in the game. And when you combine that with a forward speed of 50 and a reverse speed of 15, it's going to be really hard to be able to outmaneuver this tank. You're going to feel as if you're very much an archaic heavy tank if you're going at about 30 or 35 instead. Hull traverse, 30, not the best here. Could mean that it's a bit more like a Batchat or an E50M when it's kind of like turning around. But still, if your power to weight ratio is good and if the ground resistances are good, the actual effective traverse of this tank will still be fantastic. Okay, so now onto the armor of this vehicle. It's actually quite disappointing with regards to the hull. It's 100 at the front, 100 at the side, and 50 at the rear. But then again, when we did take a look at the screenshots of this tank, when we just look at how low profile and how well angled this vehicle is, could it still be ricocheting very consistently? I guess, unless you're underneath the tank shooting up into that lower plate, or if you're above it and shooting down on the hull, or if you're face hugging and you've got the gun depression to shoot down on the hull armor, I think it's going to be very good. I can imagine this thing pretty much driving along at about, a 40-degree angle, trying to advance in a situation like this, like a little bit more over, a little bit turned towards me. And then it's going to be a very imposing tank to pen. And if you're in a vehicle that can't bounce it, then it's going to be able to make very effective trades against you. Yeah, it's more of a medium tank than a heavy tank, really, with regards to that kind of hull armor. Think about Object 140, upper plate, not very good, but the hyper-angling, we all know how well it works on a Stridsvagn 103B, for example, and that thing only has about 40 or 50 millimeters of armor. Imagine if you have that kind of angling with 100, it could be very decent. The turret, however, is great. 300 at the front, 200 at the side, and 60 at the rear. Looks like this thing is going to probably be able to sit impervious in a hold down position. And when we look for the cupolas that this vehicle has, looks like it might have a slight one to the right of the vehicle. It's still quite hard to be able to hit. Oh, maybe it's actually a central cupola that we can see there. Yep, looks like the cupola is actually in the central part of the vehicle. Still looks like it's quite hard to hit. And imagine this is what you will be seeing if the tank's using its 5 degrees of gun depression. Although Wargaming are using the gun there to hide that kind of cupola from the bottom, but it's still going to be a very challenging tank to hit. Whether you can load heat and shoot through the cheeks of this vehicle is another question, and it's only something that I'm going to be able to answer when I do my full review of this vehicle, when I get my hands on it. So the 780, looking very, very solid. And the hit points of 2,300 aren't going to let it down either, giving it a slight edge on the other two vehicles in this comparison. And with 400 meters view range, sometimes I question why I would play a medium tank when I can get a vehicle like this. So all in all, the Object 780. I would actually like to, before I give the conclusion of this tank, I actually want to address Wargaming and give my feedback on where I think the current meta of the game is going. I feel that vehicles that can sit in a position like this, in a hold down format, should not be able to go at 50 kilometers an hour. They're rushing into positions, they're taking the most important locations, and all of the other slower tanks, and God forbid your lower tiered vehicles, which you try and name some of the tier 9 heavy tanks that aren't Soviet that can go above 35 or 40 kilometers an hour, right? They're so imposing. They're able to race and take the most important locations, and then when they're there, they're impervious inside them. I really do not like the fact that heavy tanks are getting faster and faster and faster. Every new heavy tank that goes into the game feels as if 50 kilometers an hour is the new standard for them. Sure, Wargaming, if you listen to the community and they say, we want faster heavy tanks. I'm sure they do. They probably also want faster heavy tanks with auto reloaders, with double barrel guns that have the Object 279E armor layout, because they want it, but they don't think that the other people on the enemy team are going to have it. And eventually, when everybody does and the meta catches up, it's leading to a very stale meta of World of Tanks right now, where I truly feel that having a turret like this and an armor layout like this, it's becoming something that you have to have, rather than some tanks it's quite nice to have it, if that makes sense. It's becoming a necessity rather than an option. I don't think tanks like this should be able to go above 35 or 40 kilometers an hour, because that's really the only chance that you have to be able to outplay them. You have to catch them making it into position. And it has to be on the heavy tank player to know when it's safe to try and sneak into that power play position. Not just a heavy tank that can get there as quick as the medium tanks can. Previously, I felt that the medium tanks would have the priority for advancing into those more aggressive positions. They'd spot out the heavies, maybe they'd damage them a little bit as they were making their way in. But now the heavy tanks get there at the same time that the mediums do. And unless you're in something really fast, like an EBR or possibly something like a Progetto 65, it's really tricky to actually be able to contest those locations unless you have fat armor. I do not like the meta of World of Tanks and where it's going. Everything is getting faster. Everything has an impervious turret. Everything's hull armor is getting better and better and better unless you just dab the 2 key and load the gold. And when I see this tank, I see this as being pretty much the sum up of tier 10 meta. I look at this thing as being quite damaging for it if it goes into the game as it is. And Wargaming can make every effort to try and reduce the damage per minute of the vehicle. They can try and, make its hull armor quite weak. But as long as you've got speed, as long as you've got turret armor, if you've got a good gun handling and 490 alpha damage, and arguably you've got object in your name. Yeah, usually those kind of things go hand in hand, right? I just feel like that is becoming a very stale meta of World of Tanks. So with that in mind, now I'm going to give my completely subjective opinion about this tank. I think it looks great. I'd love to have this, because why wouldn't I? I like to win my games. I like to do fat damage. I like to be able to destroy enemy vehicles while they have absolutely no hope of fighting back against me. But am I going to enjoy playing the game in 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I'm hoping that I'm only halfway through my enjoyment of World of Tanks. I hope it's something that we always get to play in the future. But I really think that vehicles like this are encouraging a really boring meta that is creating a ticking time bomb of a problem for wargaming that is probably never going to be fixable inside the game. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. That was the Object 780. Let me know what you think about this tank in the comments down below. Do you think that it looks like the statistics of the vehicle are completely balanced? Also, one thing I'd like to add to that is that remember that these are the kinds of vehicles that are really punching above their weight inside the random queue, right, with their flexibility. Just because the damage per minute of this vehicle doesn't look the best, just because kind of like the hull armor and the top speed limit of this tank, it looks the same as the other vehicles, right? Keep in mind that the WZ-111-5A has cupola weaknesses. The 277 doesn't have the extra half degree of gun depression. More importantly, the 277's frontal hull is quite easy to deal with, unlike the hull armor that we seem to be kind of getting ourselves into with this 780 here. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And make sure you have your say and have your feedback. It's really important to have that. It's always been important in World of Tanks to deliver your feedback. And hopefully Wargaming will listen to it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.